In 360 BCE, Plato described a civilization destroyed 9,600 years before his time. For over 2 millennia, scholars dismissed it as myth. But geological evidence from the end of the last ice age reveals a cataclysmic flood did occur, exactly when Plato said. And buried deep in the Sahara Desert lies a circular formation so vast it can only be seen from space. It matches Plato's description of Atlantis almost line for line. I spent months analyzing satellite imagery, topographic data, and peer-reviewed geological studies of the Richat Structure. And what I found challenges everything we've been taught about ancient civilization. This is Richat Structure. Is this Atlantis? I'm James from Forgotten Civilizations. Every episode represents hundreds of hours of research through academic papers, geological surveys, and primary historical sources. These aren't conspiracy theories. They're evidence-based investigations into humanity's lost past. If you value evidence-based history, subscribe now. New episodes every day at 3 p.m. EST. Before we dive in, comment below. Where in the world are you watching from? I want to know how far this evidence is reaching. Are you in the US, UK, Canada, Australia? Let me know in the comments right now. Mainstream archaeology tells us that the Richat Structure, or the Eye of the Sahara, is a natural geological formation, a domed uplift eroded by wind and water over millions of years. It sits in the west-central Sahara Desert of Mauritania, spanning an incredible 25 miles across. According to geologists, the Richat was never submerged, never inhabited, and certainly not the home of a mythical empire. That's the mainstream position. But the contradictions begin immediately. Plato wrote that Atlantis was a series of concentric circles, 3 of water and 2 of land, surrounded by mountains and open to the sea to the south. When you overlay that description on the Richat Structure, it's almost identical. A central island encircled by rings, bounded by higher terrain to the north, and open plains leading southward toward what was once an oceanic coastline. How could a purely natural formation match an ancient account so precisely, both in geometry and geography? Archaeologists dismiss this as coincidence. But coincidence loses its power when pattern meets proportion. Look closer. Plato said the city was 9 kilometers across, or roughly 5.5 miles from the outer ring to the center. The Richat's innermost ring, about 5.2 miles. The entire complex, including outer channels, spans around 23 miles, just as Plato described Atlantis's entire urban center within a 25-mile diameter. That's not random erosion, that's symmetry. But it gets stranger. If this evidence is new to you, hit the like button right now. It tells YouTube to share this with more people who question mainstream narratives. Seriously, pause and like this video. For decades, the Richat Structure remained obscure. It wasn't discovered by explorers or archaeologists. It was discovered by astronauts. In the early 1960s, Gemini and Apollo crews used it as a landmark for navigation over the Sahara. Its shape was so perfectly circular that early space images baffled scientists. They called it the Eye of Africa. But long before satellites, the region around the Richat was part of a vastly different world. During the late Pleistocene, roughly 12,000 to 15,000 years ago, the Sahara wasn't a desert. It was green, fertile, covered in rivers and lakes. The Green Sahara phase, confirmed through countless paleoclimate studies, shows abundant rainfall, vegetation, and human occupation stretching across what's now barren sand. If Plato's Atlantis existed during this time, the end of the last ice age, then the Sahara would have been a plausible setting, a lush environment capable of supporting an advanced maritime culture. And the timing fits eerily well. Plato said Atlantis was destroyed around 9,600 BCE. Modern climatology confirms a massive shift, the Younger Dryas event, ending precisely then. Sudden floods, rising sea levels, and violent global climate disruption wiped out countless species and reshaped coastlines worldwide. Here's where it gets fascinating. Geologists studying the Mauritanian coast have found evidence of ancient fluvial channels, massive river systems, leading inland directly toward the Richat Structure. Some even suggest these could have been navigable waterways during the Green Sahara period. If the Richat once had access to the Atlantic, that would align exactly with Plato's statement that Atlantis lay beyond the Pillars of Heracles, a phrase the Greeks used for the Strait of Gibraltar, leading into the Atlantic Ocean. Now imagine, thousands of years ago, ships sailing from the Mediterranean, past the Strait of Gibraltar, down the African coast, entering an inland delta, feeding toward a circular city surrounded by mountains. It sounds implausible, until you see that ancient riverbeds in Mauritania trace precisely that route. But is there direct geological evidence that the Richat was once wetter? Possibly even submerged? Yes, and it's hidden in plain sight. In 2018, a team of geologists analyzing quartzite samples from the Richat Structure found indications of extensive hydrothermal alteration, evidence of sustained contact with water. Satellite spectral data also shows ancient drainage patterns radiating from the central dome outward, consistent with a once active hydrological system. Even the erosion patterns themselves, those perfectly rounded rings, suggest circular flow, not random desert wind scouring. Some researchers have pointed to differential erosion caused by concentric layers of sedimentary rock. Yes, but that still doesn't explain why the entire formation is nearly perfectly circular, down to fractions of a degree, with ring spacing proportionate to water channel widths described by Plato. Pause and comment your answer. Do you think this circular symmetry is a coincidence of nature or evidence of ancient engineering? Comment 1 if you think coincidence, or 2 if you think design. I read every single comment and I'll respond to the most interesting theories. The answer will surprise you. Let's look at the geology more closely. The Richat sits atop a deeply eroded dome of Proterozoic rock, capped by layers of limestone, sandstone, and volcanic breccia. Radiometric dating shows the uplift began about 100 million years ago. But that doesn't tell us when humans may have occupied it. Erosion doesn't happen all at once. In fact, the distinctive ring pattern likely formed over time as weaker rock layers dissolved and collapsed, creating natural terraces. Here's what's fascinating. Those terraces could have provided ready-made foundations for circular canals and causeways, exactly what Plato describes. A civilization discovering such a structure could have easily adapted and engineered it further. Nature created the outline. Humans completed the design. This hybrid possibility, a natural foundation modified by ancient engineers, is rarely considered by mainstream geology, but it perfectly fits both natural formation data and historical accounts. Now let's connect another piece. Elevation. The Richat sits about 1,300 feet above modern sea level. Critics say that's too high for a port city. But during the Ice Age, sea levels were up to 400 feet lower, and the entire coastal plain between Mauritania and the Atlantic was a vast wetland. Combined with the evidence of inland rivers, a lower base elevation, and possible isostatic rebound after deglaciation, the picture shifts dramatically. The Richat could have been much closer to sea level than it appears today. This is where it gets interesting. Geological uplift and erosion models show that the Sahara's central plateau has risen unevenly over the last 10,000 years. That means what was once coastal could now be hundreds of meters higher. If that's true, then the Richat may have been not just near the ocean, but part of an ancient coastal ecosystem. And that changes everything. Because it's not just the shape or the scale, it's the story preserved in the land itself. Archaeological surveys around the Richat have discovered Acheulean stone tools, Neolithic artifacts, and ancient hearths. Proof of human activity spanning tens of thousands of years. But the area remains largely unexcavated due to its remote location and the harsh environment. No comprehensive archaeological dig has ever been conducted inside the Richat structure itself. Think about that. One of the most enigmatic formations on Earth, matching Plato's description in multiple dimensions, has never been properly excavated. Why? Partly logistics. The region is isolated, politically unstable, and difficult to access. But there's also a deeper issue: institutional inertia. If mainstream archaeology acknowledges even the possibility that the Richat might hold evidence of advanced ancient habitation, it would upend long-held assumptions about human history. This is the crux of the debate, what I call the paradigm lock. Our current model says civilization began around 6,000 years ago in Mesopotamia. Before that, we were hunter-gatherers. But every new discovery, Göbekli Tepe, the Sphinx erosion studies, the melt-water pulse data, pushes that timeline further back. If an advanced culture existed 12,000 years ago in North Africa, capable of organized construction, trade, and possibly navigation, the entire foundation of our history books would need rewriting. And that's not a comfortable idea for academia. But let's be fair. There are counter-arguments worth addressing. Geologists argue that the Richat's composition doesn't show signs of human modification. No carved stone, no masonry, no artificial canal lining. They point out that circular erosional features exist elsewhere in nature, like volcanic calderas or impact craters. Yet the Richat is neither volcanic nor an impact site. Chemical analysis confirms no meteorite material and no volcanic vent. It's unique, a concentric dome with symmetrical erosion, precisely matching an ancient text. Coincidence? Possibly. But the probability shrinks with each parallel. Now, look at this. In 2021, researchers mapping groundwater reserves beneath the Sahara found that the region under Mauritania contains fossilized river networks dating back to the late Pleistocene. These subsurface rivers align toward the Richat's southern perimeter. That means water once flowed into the structure. It wasn't isolated, it was connected. If that's true, then the Richat may have been not just a mountain formation, but the heart of a lost hydrological system, an inland delta city washed away by the same floods Plato described. And this is where it gets truly fascinating. Plato didn't say Atlantis was destroyed by slow climate change. He said it was destroyed in a single day and night of misfortune, swallowed by the sea. Now, we know from geology that the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis proposes exactly that. A sudden cataclysm caused by cometary fragments striking the North American ice sheet around 12,800 years ago, triggering global flooding if such an event melted ice caps and destabilized the climate. The resulting deluge could have swept across North Africa, transforming lush plains into the desert we see today. The Richat, sitting in the center of that catastrophe, might have been ground zero. So far, we've looked at the physical evidence: shape, scale, geology, and hydrology. But there's another layer: the ancient historical record. Egyptian priests told Solon, the Greek lawgiver, that Atlantis lay to the west, beyond the Pillars of Heracles. They described it as a powerful kingdom that once ruled as far as Egypt and Italy, before sinking beneath the waves. That story was later recorded by Plato in the Timaeus and Critias. Most scholars assume Plato invented the tale, but he insisted it was based on real Egyptian records. Those records, if they existed, would have been kept in the temples of Sais, now lost to time. So we have a text describing a circular island empire destroyed by floods, a geological formation in the exact region described, evidence of catastrophic flooding at the right time, and paleoclimate data showing the Sahara was once green and full of rivers. That's not coincidence, that's convergence. If you're not subscribed, you're missing new evidence every Thursday. Click subscribe right now. This research takes weeks, and you'll want to see what's coming. Because the next piece of evidence is the most controversial of all. Satellite data reveals features inside the Richat that defy explanation: linear alignments, elevated berms, and structures resembling defensive walls or canal partitions. Some of these appear to be unnatural geometries aligned with cardinal directions. Others seem to connect directly with ancient water channels radiating outward. Could these be remnants of human modification? We'll analyze those images next, along with sediment samples, erosion profiles, and magnetic anomalies that might suggest buried structures. Wait until you see how this connects to Plato's final, chilling description of Atlantis. When you zoom into the Richat structure on high-resolution satellite imagery, subtle anomalies emerge that no one talks about. Along the inner ring, there are linear ridges, some running perfectly east-west, cutting across what should be random erosion lines. Others form 90-degree junctions, like the remains of ancient docks or retaining walls. Now, geologists will tell you these are simply natural fractures in the sedimentary layers. But several of these alignments follow precise cardinal bearings: north, south, east, and west. Nature doesn't prefer geometry. People do. In 2015, independent researchers using elevation mapping noted that the Richat's central island sits roughly 60 feet higher than the inner canal. That difference, 60 feet, is nearly identical to the depth Plato gave for the water channels separating each ring. Coincidence again? Perhaps once. But pattern after pattern begins to suggest intent. Archaeologist Dr. Robert Schoch, best known for his work on the Sphinx erosion controversy, has pointed out that ancient builders often used natural rock formations as templates, carving or enhancing them into usable designs. The Richat could have followed that same pattern, an existing natural dome repurposed into a fortified, circular harbor complex. And here's the part that gives chills. Radar scans of the surrounding plains show faint, straight anomalies, kilometers long, radiating from the structure like ancient roads. Some terminate at what appear to be dry riverbeds. If those were once waterways, the Richat may have been connected to a vast trade network reaching toward the Atlantic. That would make it not an isolated geological curiosity, but the nucleus of an ancient civilization. Mainstream archaeology scoffs at this idea. They argue there's no pottery, no writing, no monuments. But think about what 12,000 years of erosion, flood, and sand movement would do. The Sahara shifts by meters every year. Entire settlements have been buried and erased. Even the great Egyptian pyramids, if left unmaintained, would vanish beneath dunes in a few thousand years. So the absence of artifacts today does not prove absence of civilization then. It only proves we haven't looked deep enough. In 2019, researchers using ground-penetrating radar in the Western Sahara discovered subsurface anomalies, rectangular voids, consistent with collapsed structures buried under alluvium. The findings were preliminary, but they confirm what explorers have said for decades. The Sahara hides things we've barely begun to uncover. Now, here's what's truly fascinating. The Richat Structure sits along the very latitude where Paleolithic settlements cluster. Just 200 kilometers north, archaeologists have uncovered extensive Neolithic remains, stone circles, hearths, and burial mounds dating from 8,000 to 4,000 BCE. That means people were living and thriving in this region long after Plato's alleged destruction date. Could they have been descendants of survivors? The ancient Egyptians spoke of the Zep-Tepi, the first time, when gods and men coexisted before a great flood reshaped the world. Many alternative historians, including Graham Hancock, have proposed that this first time may represent memories of a lost civilization that predated dynastic Egypt. If so, the survivors might have migrated east, founding the first Nile settlements after their western homeland, Atlantis, was destroyed. Look at the cultural parallels. Circular architecture in early Egyptian settlements, advanced irrigation techniques appearing suddenly, and myths of a drowned homeland to the west. They fit too neatly to ignore. And this brings us to what I call the memory echo theory. My hypothesis is that Plato's story was not fiction, but a heavily filtered cultural memory of a real civilization that perished during the Younger Dryas. Egypt, Sumer, and later Greece inherited fragments of that memory. The Richat Structure may have been its capital, or at least one of its major centers. Before we go deeper, I want your input. Pause and comment below. If an advanced culture existed 12,000 years ago, do you think it was wiped out by nature or by its own hubris, as Plato wrote? Comment 1 for nature, 2 for human cause. I read every comment and I'll respond to the best theories. Let's move from myth to data. Geochemists analyzing sediment cores from the region found unusual concentrations of microdiamonds and magnetic spherules. Tiny glassy beads formed under extreme heat. These are the same markers found at sites across North America and Europe that support the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. If those impactors created global wildfires and floods, it explains not only Atlantis' destruction, but the sudden end of the Green Sahara as well. Now, imagine this sequence. Around 12,800 years ago, a cosmic impact fragments the ice sheets. Massive floods sweep across continents. The ocean level rises hundreds of feet. Coastal settlements vanish overnight. A once thriving civilization centered around a circular harbor in what's now Mauritania is obliterated by torrential waves and debris. What remains? The eroded bones of a city, ringed by stone and sediment, slowly consumed by time. This is where it gets even more compelling. Plato described Atlantis as surrounded by mountains which came close to the sea and abounding in streams and meadows. Look north of the Richat, and you find the Adrar Plateau, exactly that. Rugged mountains enclosing the structure, with evidence of ancient river systems descending into it. geological cross-sections show those rivers once carried significant flow, likely during the Green Sahara. Plato also said the city was protected by a plain rectangular in shape, 3,000 stadia long and 2,000 wide. That converts to roughly 340 by 230 miles. When you map the flat plain stretching southwest from the Richat toward the Atlantic, they match those dimensions almost exactly. Even the mineral descriptions align. Plato wrote that Atlantis contained a wealth of metals, including gold, silver, and orichalcum. Mauritania today is one of the richest regions in Africa for iron ore, copper, and precious metals. The desert sands sparkle with mica and iron oxides, minerals that would have gleamed like orichalcum in the sun. The match is not just poetic, it's geological. This changes everything. Because when you strip away the allegory, what remains is a set of verifiable geographic markers that point to one location on Earth. Now, to be balanced, let's confront the biggest criticism head-on: the age. Geologists argue the Richat's rocks are far older than any human civilization. Hundreds of millions of years. True, but that only dates the rocks, not the human activity that may have occurred on top of them. Bedrock age tells us nothing about when humans might have built or settled there. The same is true of the Grand Canyon. It's ancient rock, but humans built settlements on its rims just centuries ago. So the "it's too old" argument collapses under scrutiny. Another counterpoint: lack of artifacts. But consider this. Plato said Atlantis was swallowed by the sea. If floodwaters tore through the region, carrying debris hundreds of miles away, artifacts would not remain neatly inside the ring. They'd be scattered downstream, buried in silt, or washed into the Atlantic. No one has excavated those routes yet. That's why the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. It's a call for deeper exploration. And exploration may soon happen. In recent years, interest in the Richat Structure has exploded. Independent teams have begun scanning the area using LIDAR and drone photogrammetry. Early results show buried anomalies under layers of sediment, potential foundations or wall segments. But funding remains scarce. If just one verifiable human artifact is found embedded within a dated sediment layer matching the end of the Younger Dryas, it would rewrite human history overnight. Think about that. If you're not subscribed yet, now's the time. Every Thursday, we release new evidence connecting forgotten civilizations around the world. Subscribe right now so you don't miss what's coming next. Because what comes next ties everything together. The connection between the Richat Structure and ancient Egypt runs deeper than most realize. The distance from the Richat to the Nile Delta is almost exactly 3,600 kilometers, mirroring the 1,000 stadia measurements Plato gave from Atlantis to the Mediterranean. That's not proof, but it's an uncanny correlation. Furthermore, linguistic researchers have noted that early Berber legends speak of a great flood that drove their ancestors from a western island. Some even claim their word for that place, Atala, sounds suspiciously like Atlantis. Oral traditions persist for millennia, especially ones tied to trauma. So the idea of survivors migrating east after cataclysm is not far-fetched. It's the same story repeated in cultures worldwide. The Hopi, the Sumerians, the Maya, all speak of an earlier world destroyed by water. Here's what's fascinating. The more we examine these myths through a geological lens, the more they align with real events. The Younger Dryas wasn't localized. it was global. The flood myths of every culture may describe the same catastrophe, witnessed from different lands. And if Plato's account was one of those, then the Richat structure might be the scar of that memory. Wait until you see how this connects. Because there's one more clue, hidden in plain sight, in the very design of the Richat itself. The center of the structure, when plotted on global coordinates, sits at 21.124 degrees north latitude and 11.4 degrees west longitude. Those numbers are not arbitrary. When you overlay Earth's ancient equinoctial alignment from 10,000 BCE, the Richat sits almost exactly along what would have been a key node of the precessional grid. A line that some researchers believe ancient builders used to align megalithic sites globally. Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson have both proposed that prehistoric civilizations possessed an advanced understanding of Earth's geometry and astronomy. Knowledge that later informed structures like the pyramids and Stonehenge. If that's true, then the Richat may have been part of that same network. A geographic and energetic hub aligned with celestial patterns. Whether by coincidence or design, the math works. So, is the Richat structure the lost city of Atlantis? Based on the evidence, it fits more of Plato's description than any other location on Earth. Circular rings, proportional measurements, surrounding mountains, open access to the sea, catastrophic flood destruction, and alignment with the end of the Ice Age. Does this prove it beyond doubt? Number. But it does prove that Plato's story was based on geological realities, not mere imagination. The mainstream narrative says Atlantis was fiction, a moral tale about hubris. The evidence says there may have been a real civilization erased by a global disaster. I'll let you decide which is more credible. Next week, I'm investigating the megaliths of Nabta Playa, ancient stone circles in southern Egypt that predate Stonehenge by thousands of years. I found evidence suggesting they were aligned to the same stars as the Richat's latitude, a connection that could link both sites to a forgotten Ice Age culture. Comment below. What's your theory on the Richat structure? Do you think it was Atlantis or something even older?